In this video we'll consider a contrast between monopoly, oligopoly and perfect competition and see what are the attributes of these types of approach to the study of markets. So imperfect competition refers to those market structures that fall between perfect competition and pure monopoly. So anything which is not perfectly competitive is imperfect. It's not perfect, so it must be imperfect. So imperfect competition is generally a violation of one of the assumptions of perfect competition. So for example, let's say the product is slightly differentiated, then that would mean an imperfect market. Monopoly is when there is a single seller for a product. At least that's the theoretical perspective of monopoly. In practice, monopoly is around 25% of the market. That's the way it's defined legally. But in terms of the theory, it's a single producer. So in between having a large number of producers, as in the case of perfect competition, almost, if you like, an infinite number of producers, in between that and one producer, there is a whole spectrum of possibilities. And in between perfect competition and pure monopoly is imperfect competition. Now, imperfect competition includes industries in which firms have competitors but are not perfectly competitive. So for example, let's say there were 4 or 5 competitors for a given company. Clearly that is not perfect competition. Perfect competition has a large number of producers, and each of the producers is a price taker. They have no influence over the price, and for that matter they're selling a homogeneous product. So with imperfect competition, generally speaking, there is competition in the context that we would probably identify it in business, where there are a number of competitors, maybe located domestically or perhaps located overseas, and they have all the problems of transporting their product to market and trying to differentiate their product and compete on price and so on. And this is what an economist would call imperfect competition. Now, the types of imperfect competition, or the types of imperfectly competitive markets. Well, oligopoly. Now, oligopoly is a market situation in which there are a few sellers. So there is strategic recognition between them. They recognize their presence. They're acutely aware of their presence. You see, with monopoly, there's only one producer, so the monopolist doesn't have to worry about competitors. The monopolist is the only producer. With perfect competition, there are so many producers that they don't worry about their existence. They simply have to deal with what confronts them, which is a large amount of competition. But with oligopoly, perhaps 3 or 4 competitors, so they're acutely aware of these competitors and the different strategies that the competitors may use to try and get market dominance or market advantage over them. So monopoly is only a few sellers, each offering a similar or even an identical product to the others. It might be slightly differentiated. It could actually be exactly the same. But because there are so few of them, they are acutely aware of each other's existence and they try to compete, knowing that they're there. So it's acute competition, but it's strategic. They are watching each other to try and gain an advantage. With perfect competition, each producer has to take what's given, because there's a very large number of producers and each one is insignificant in comparison to the total. With monopoly, there is only one, so the monopolist doesn't have to worry about anyone else. So oligopoly seems to be more in accordance with what we would understand as competition. A few firms competing and each watching each other, trying to outwit each other in terms of product design, differentiation, perhaps even competition on price. But the trouble about changing price in oligopoly is it could lead to a price war, which is very destructive. It could lead to bankruptcies, which is actually not in the interest of the consumer. The consumer may enjoy the fact there's a price war because the consumer is getting the products very cheaply. But if the companies go out of existence, then the consumers will have reduced choice. So price wars are not good things. There's also a model, monopolistic competition. And I should say, by the way, that these are the subject matter of other videos on the course. But monopolistic competition is a large number of producers all producing a slightly different product. So the competition here is on differentiation. They compete on differentiated products. But the products are very close to each other. They're just slightly different. And that's how they compete. So there are many firms selling products that are similar but not identical, just slightly different. So those are two types of models, very important models in the study of economics and the study of microeconomics, that we can distinguish away from perfect competition and monopoly. If you like, perfect competition and monopoly are the extreme cases. So let's do it in terms of a little diagram. So we have the number of firms. Well, if there's one firm, it's a monopoly. Only one supplier. Now, that's the theoretical view. As I said, legally it could be 20% of the market in the UK. But in terms of theory, a monopoly is a single seller. An oligopoly is a few firms. They are acutely aware of their existence and they try to differentiate their product. They try to outcompete each other. They try to innovate, change, and so on, to try and get an advantage over each other. An example there would be, say, the aircraft industry. Very few companies make aircraft. So the aircraft companies are acutely aware of each other's existence. They're acutely aware of the types of innovations they're introducing into their production techniques and so on. And they try to outcompete each other normally in terms of quality of the good, reputation, image, and even technical specifications. Then we go to the other extreme where we have many firms. So we've gone from one to few, now to many. And by many we could even mean a very large number, almost in some books it's written as infinite. I think probably that's a bit too extreme, but many firms. Now this is divided into, first of all, monopolistic competition, which has many firms, but differentiated products. Small cars might be an example. Many companies make small cars. And the small cars are very similar in terms of their design and functionality. But the companies that produce them are constantly trying to add something, to change something, to modify it, to make it different. And that's the nature of competition in monopolistic competition. It's based on differences. And then, of course, we have perfect competition, which case the product is identical. And some people think the stock exchanges have all the attributes of perfectly competitive markets. The shares that are bought and sold are all homogeneous, they're all the same, all ordinary shares in a particular company. There's very good communications, so knowledge about the product and about the market is almost instantaneous. The prices are determined by the dealers, and there are so many dealers that they have to drive down their margins. So it may be an example of perfect competition. It might be worth writing out the assumptions of perfect competition and yourself and going through the attributes of modern stock exchanges and stock markets and seeing to what extent it could be argued that the stock exchange is perfectly competitive. Be a useful exercise. Now, because of the few sellers, here we're talking about essentially oligopoly, the key features of oligopoly is the tension between cooperation and self-interest. In oligopoly, the companies have to decide, do they compete or do they get together to get rid of the uncertainty caused by the market in which they're operating in, the strategic interdependence that they've got. So would it be better if they could come together and form some sort of agreement and stop the competition in effect? So the characteristics of an oligopolistic market: well, few sellers offering similar or identical products. That's one of the attributes of an oligopolistic market. And in fairness, that seems to be the case in many markets that we study in business, more so than perhaps in economics. The firms are interdependent. They are linked because they sell essentially the same product. The product is slightly different and it's presented to the customers differently, but it's essentially the same product. It's tweaked, if you like. It's altered to try and get sales. So the firms are interdependent and they have to watch each other very closely. The best of cooperating and acting like a monopolist, producing a small quantity of output and charging a price above marginal cost. So if they could get together, if all the firms in the oligopolistic market could agree to work together, in effect they then have become a monopoly. If they can work together, they become a monopoly. And of course that may not be in the interest of the buyer, because now the price is more expensive, there's reduced innovation, reduced change, reduced competition, so the buyer may suffer as a consequence. A duopoly is a special case of monopoly. This is one where there is only two members. The name suggests a duopoly, two members. It's the simplest type of oligopoly. There are just two producers, in which case they are acutely aware of each other's existence and watch each other very carefully. Monopolists may agree to act like a monopoly. They may actually get together and agree on the price of the product that will be charged. They could even agree on sharing production facilities. They're essentially operating in the same market, so instead of competition, which pushes the price down or drives the price down for the consumer, they may agree to keep the price up. So they are, in a sense, colluding to keep the price up. Now, collusion is an agreement amongst firms in the market about quantities to produce or prices to charge. And collusion, generally speaking, it's illegal. Generally speaking, it's certainly not seen as good commercial practice. It's operating against the public interest. Mind you, it's very difficult to know what the public interest is. We rely on the courts trying to work out what the public interest is and whether a certain course of action is against the public interest or is fine by the public interest, is acceptable in terms of the public interest. So there are issues about what we mean by collusion and whether collusion is good or bad. Collusion, for example, could be a good thing if it's companies within some country colluding so as to try to get a foothold in an overseas market. Now, is that against the public interest? So it's a very debatable point, but collusion, generally speaking, is seen as not good. It's seen as something secretive. It's an agreement that they have come up with, and They don't want anyone to know about it. Because it's secretive, it's generally speaking seen as not desirable, and it's not in the public interest. A cartel is much stronger. A cartel is a group of firms acting in unison. This is when the firms actually get together. They agree the price, they agree the quantity to be produced. Now, this may certainly be against the public interest. This is when a group of firms act like a monopolist and actually have agreements between themselves how to behave. Now, that is against the spirit of competition. Although oligopolists would like to form cartels and earn monopoly profits, often it's not possible. Sometimes monopolists, they would like to get together and form cartels, but there are many problems that they confront in so doing. For example, antitrust laws. They prohibit explicit agreements amongst oligopolists as a matter of public policy. So the law simply steps in and stops oligopolists from doing it. So it's the fear of being investigated by the law may stop companies from forming agreements to not compete. But if they're not competing, in a sense they're acting against the public interest. The whole idea is, therefore, they're going to charge more and perhaps give the consumer less of the product, or not innovate the product, or not develop the product, because the pressure of competition has been removed. Differences between cartel members. For example, some members of the cartel might be dominant and might be very large producers. Others might be very small. Now, it's very difficult for those two to get together to form a cartel. The big company doesn't see any need to involve the small company. So dominance could be an issue that stops cartels from forming. There could also be an issue of a low-cost firm. A low-cost firm is one who's very efficient about production, distribution, very clever about how it uses resources. And because it's so efficient, it can cut the price if it wants and still make a profit. It's so efficient. That means the other members of the cartel will have to suffer that very efficient producer. And that's going to put pressure on the cartel. As a club, if you like, the cartel could be seen as a club. And as a club, it will start to break up. They'll find it difficult to work with a very efficient producer. And there's also a type of firm called the barometric price leader. Now, barometric price leader, this is really an economics slang term for a company that's always changing the product, always changing what it's doing in the market, constantly innovating and tweaking and being unpredictable in its behavior. But it has a good history of predicting the market. So although it's changing a lot and constantly experimenting, it seems to be getting it right. Now, that's a barometric price leader, and if such a firm existed within a cartel, then the cartel would have problems, in a sense, controlling that member, because they like to experiment, they like to change the product, they like to innovate. They're constantly doing things, constantly changing, and that means the other members of the cartel would find it difficult to, in a sense, keep up with them. But also, there's an issue about the numbers involved. When a cartel gets bigger and more people join, more companies join it, it's more difficult to get an agreement. It's like in a club. When members of a club meet, if it's only 3 or 4 members in the club, then they can easily get an agreement. They can sit around and discuss the issues and agree. But as the numbers involved in the club increases, it's more and more likely that some will start to disagree. They will dissent, and that will make decision making very difficult. And it's the same in a cartel. As the number involved in the cartel grows, there's going to be more problems in trying to get an agreement. It's also cheating. Sometimes if companies agree to reduce the amount they're putting on the market, thereby forcing the price up. They're holding back putting products on the market, thereby causing the price in the market to rise. So they're able to sell able to sell at a higher price eventually. Now if all the members of the cartel agree to it, and one member of the cartel sees the price rising, then that person or that company may step up production. This often happens in the context of oil. Oil is run by a cartel called OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. And in OPEC, they sometimes agree not to step up production of oil so that the price of oil in the market, in the world market, will rise. But then some countries cheat. They see the price rising and they step up production. So cheating is something which can wreck a cartel. And changing market conditions for the product. The market conditions can be varied due to many issues. It could be a health and safety report on the product, which may influence consumer reaction to the product, which will influence the existence or the possibility of a cartel. It could be that publicity about cartels means that members of the cartel don't want to be seen to be involved with this, and it becomes a secret society, and they're unhappy about living their lives in this way, and the cartel starts to fold up again because of these types of issues. So what we've looked at here in this brief video is an overview of monopoly, just very brief few words about monopoly, some ideas about oligopoly, types of oligopoly and so on, and also something to do with cartels and agreements as a solution to the strategic interdependence that oligopolists face, because they are so few in number and because they are so acutely aware of each other's existence. But that's all we're going to deal with in this video, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.